valley. Where he had been at his lowest low, God was always with him. And when he came back and started calling on the name of the Lord, it's as though God's purposes for life never took a break. They're right there. God was always with him. And God speaks words of blessing to him again. You know, it's not as though God now wants to smite him, but instead just with love, okay, Abram, you're back now. Here's all the blessings I'm going to pour out on you. And I think about kind of that visual representation, almost how that works in our life. How from time to time we come into a series of trials or struggles, and we begin to wonder where God is, and slowly but surely we veer off in a direction that maybe we know we shouldn't go in, but we get farther and farther and farther down that road. But no matter how far down that road we get, God never leaves us. And some of us get way down that road. God never leaves us. And when he draws us back, there's this tremendous sense of grace, forgiveness, where God's promises of blessing, they just always stay with us. Okay, you're back in this place. You're calling on the name of the Lord, and God speaks words of blessing. I think that's a great picture. I want to talk also about Lot, and so I want you to look with me at verse 5. So they get back to that place where he first built the altar. Abram calls on the name of the Lord. It says in verse 5, now Lot. You remember Lot, right? His brother had died. That was his son. Lot had gone with Abram when he left his country and his family. Now Lot, who was moving about with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. But the land could not support them while they stayed together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together. Lot had gone down with him to Egypt. Lot also, in the process of Abram becoming rich through this whole scheme, also himself becomes very rich. And when they come back, although they come back together, they're not quite together. All the possessions they accumulated, there's some problem. And it says here that there was quarreling among Abram's herdsmen and the herdsmen of Lot. And the Canaanites and Perizzites are also in the land. So verse 8 says, Abram said to Lot, let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herdsmen and mine, for we are brothers. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. It says in verse 10, Abram looked up and saw the whole plain of the Jordan was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. He had been with him in Egypt. He had experienced what Egypt was like. And there was something about that place that appealed to him, the way Egypt appealed to him toward Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out toward the east. The two men parted company. Abram lived in the land of Canaan. Now, Canaan was that place that God said, go to that land, I'll show you. So they went to the land of Canaan. And Abram now lives in the land of Canaan. It says, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. And then there's this word. Now the men of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. Some of you know that this last year my wife and I had an opportunity to go to Israel and actually probably stood in the very place where Lot and Abram had this conversation. And I wish that I can try somehow to get you to see the scene of what they saw when Abram said, if you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. And I think in order to understand this passage, we almost have to understand where they were standing, what they were looking at, and what was being said here. And so I'm going to put up a map on the screen. And I know this, you're going to have to use your imagination here a lot, okay? You can see here on this map, this is a map of Israel. If you look at the very top, you see the Sea of Galilee. That's where Jesus had a lot of his ministry near the top. The Sea of Galilee, there is a rift that comes down. You see the red line there. That's not very helpful, but the Jordan River goes down that valley and empties into, at the bottom you can see that large sea, which is the Dead Sea. And to the left then is the land of Canaan, where God had told Abram to go. And in fact, where that red dot is, I placed that there, that is more or less near Bethel, where they were standing. Now, as they were standing, I think this is important to say, they were facing east. They were facing the Jordan River. And God had said to them, okay, now go to the land I'm going to show you, and that was the land of Canaan. And the land of Canaan is everything to the west on the left-hand side of the Jordan River. And when Abram said, as they're looking out over the Jordan River, and actually as you stand there, you can see the Dead Sea down on the right-hand side. He said, okay, if you go to the left, if you're standing there looking east, that would be north. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right, which would be south. You have this in your mind's eye? Or if you go to the right, if you Lot, go south, then I'll go north. And I think once you understand that, you realize that Abram had no expectation that they were going to leave the land of Canaan, either one of them. They were both going to stay in that land where God had told them to go. But the Bible says, and if you look at the passage, it says, Lot looked up. You may look at that verse. Which verse is it here, just so you can find it? I think it's verse 10. Lot looked up. When he looked up, if they're facing east, what did he see? That valley where the Jordan River was. It says that the whole plain of the Jordan was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt toward Zoar. So Abram's expectation is, hey, you go to the north in Canaan, and I'll go to the south in Canaan. You go to the south in Canaan, we're going to stay here in the land of promise, but Lot looks up, and he sees there's another place that looks really good. He's been to Egypt. It reminds him a little bit of Egypt. And although it becomes plain that the people there are not the right kind of people to go be among. In fact, if you look with me, it says at verse 13, now the men of Sodom, where he's intending to go, are wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. Although that's not the place to go, he looks up, he says, there's something there that looks good. And he looks up and says, that's where I'm going to go. And so you get the idea here. Abram is thinking they're going to stay, and he says, no, I'm going to take that first step towards somewhere else. Now, it's important to kind of look at the progression here, and if you know the story of Lot just a little bit, this will make even more sense. But it says here, if you look at verse 12, that Abram lived in the land of Canaan. He stayed where God told him to go, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. He knows that the people of that city are very wicked. He, at first, doesn't immediately take up residence in that city. He just stays to himself outside. He leaves that land where God had told him to go. He takes kind of a first step, but doesn't go all the way. If you continue to read this story forward, you realize that first step leads to a second, which leads to a third, which leads to the fourth. A little while later on, we meet Lot, and it says of him that he's in the city gate of Sodom. God at that point had decided he was going to destroy that city because of how wicked it is. If you're a person who sits in the city gate, that means that you are a prominent person in that city. And so later on as the story progresses, it's not that he's living outside in tents anymore. It's not just that he's living inside the city, but he's risen up as a prominent person of the city, that he could sit in the city gates. And so he's no longer separated with the kind of separation he first was. He's taken another step. And some of you know the story. You know God eventually destroys Sodom and Gomorrah, and Lot makes it out with his two daughters. The way Lot's story ends is, it's kind of gone down off the cliff. Does anyone remember how the story ends? He and the daughters escape, and the daughters now say to themselves, man, our family is going to die. We don't have any kids. We don't have any husband. Hey, come here, sister. Here's what we'll do. Let's get Dad drunk tonight. And let's go and lie down with him. And let's make a baby.